Hello, so we'll have a look at this interesting game, the main theme of which will be attacking on the queen side and actually pointing out some targets that where we are going to attack. And we will see why will be important. So let's get into the game. So the opening is kind of strange. Black lost a pawn on move 2. He's kind of trying to get it back, and he does, but actually in this position we can see Black already has some weaknesses. And the concept of weaknesses is very important in all of chess, especially in the opening and the middle game. And we can see the weaknesses are here. For now, e5 and e6. What's a weakness? In general, a square that is hard to defend and easy to attack. For now, e5 is very easy to attack, impossible to defend, basically because there are no pawns on each side. e6 might become a weakness later. So black's position is already bad. Bishop d3 is a nice move to exchange one defender of this square. Black refuses. Now bishop b5. So the player is content with this move, but this clearly violates an opening principle. I understand this is kind of concrete to try and play knight e5. And the comment says that knight e5 is going to happen next, but it's just not if the opponent finds bishop g4, right? And this isn't some very difficult move to find. So if we see this, we understand that obviously white should just castle, play rook e1, bishop f4. Depending on what black does, white has a very easy game. Instead, black gave some check and then castled queenside, which is, well, if we look at his position, we can tell black is basically lost as he has an open king. He has now, I could say, five weaknesses maybe. One of them is c6, e6, e5, c5, and then whatever weakness on the a file you can choose for yourself. They're all weak squares, and the king as well. So there are many weaknesses, and black's only advantage is, I guess, the bishop pair, but that's not really important right now. So after castling, white is basically winning, but of course to win a position we have to do something concrete. And what white should do here is attack on the queen side, which is obvious enough as all the weaknesses are there. But again, let's see the queen side weaknesses. c6, let's say a6, a5, c5, a7, and the king more generally. So when we embark on a queenside attack, we have to be a bit more specific. What exactly are we attacking? Oftentimes, the presumption is that we're attacking the king. But of course, in chess, when we are conducting an attack on the king, we're not actually attacking the king, right? We're not trying to check the king as many times as possible. That is not our aim. In general, we are trying to attack the squares around the king, which conveniently here are very weak. Right? This is basically why white's position is completely winning, because black not only has his moving target, which is a king, that is never really safe anywhere, but these pawns will never be better, right? They will always be weak, while black doesn't really have much to attack. So, of course, black should try to develop as fast as possible, knight f6, maybe try to play g5, maybe develop like this, to get rid of this knight at least. Instead, black puts his rook on d6, which I guess makes sense to defend the pawn, but black is in no position to make passive moves. Rook e1 was played, a very nice move, getting a new piece in the game. I guess there's a threat of knight c4, but I don't think white should settle for such small victories as an exchange up. So queen f6, again moving around the queen. Black should just develop his pieces, something like this. Black should be happy about giving up the exchange to get rid of some white pieces. But okay, here white should try to, I guess, an attack on the queen side, right? The obvious move being c4. Why is it so obvious? Well, clearly queen a4 is part of our agenda. Also, we're attacking with a pawn up compared to what happened in the game. This pawn can either take here or go further. Taking on c4 is never an issue for white. He doesn't really care about the pawns themselves. Also, this completely ruins his structure. And after something like queen a4, knight c3, bishop f4, or e3, the game is basically over because the position is opening up with no black pieces in the game. And knight d2 is also fine. Knight h6, knight df3, and this kind of shows that white isn't really aiming for the biggest possible advantage. Of course, this doesn't really ruin anything, as there's stuff on the king side as well. But in general, we should not give black time to defend. For example, after this, knight f7, now at least some pieces are getting exchanged. c3 was played, which is of course kind of slow. c4 is quite similar, but it's a lot better because it gains time. When we're attacking, we really want to gain a lot of time. Now the immediate threat is probably c5 to push the rook off of the square and just have a new attacker in the game and fix this pawn on c6, after which without the rook it will be quite difficult to defend. Again, this isn't an issue, and white is just winning in all variations. c3 is similar, but it's less to the point. Now there is no immediate threat like after c4, so black has at least one move. He wastes this move with h6. I think he should either play g5 or king b7, something more useful, but okay. Now knight f7. The reason for taking here is kind of left unclear here, as black isn't threatening this anyway. But this doesn't change much. Queen a4. And now black found the plan of securing his king with rook b8. So now white should try to understand that time is running out. The weaknesses that he can attack are still gonna be there, but this king will eventually become safe. So if our aim is to attack the king, we have to be fast. But if our aim is to attack the weaknesses, which are here, then we can kind of improve the position more slowly, like knight e5, b3, bishop a3. We can play on either way. This is how big white's advantage is, that he doesn't really have to be precise here yet. So knight e5, threat is here, queen goes here. Now this check. Again, what exactly are we trying to attack? Because if we're trying to attack the king, we will not be able to take the king, right? This isn't our point. So checking without any good reason to do that is just a waste of time. And now our queen didn't really improve, and his king improved. Our queen was attacking one of the weaknesses, and his king was on an open file. Now a4, and again, it's not clear what white is trying to do here. He's not really developing, he's not attacking any weaknesses. Now he decided to embark on this plan, which involves 3 moves with a pawn, which means 3 moves without any development. And then after threatening queen b7, he will lose another tempo after rook b8. And these moves by black aren't too hard, right? Like what else is he supposed to do here? Here, if white wants to continue his attack, he really needs to start attacking these weaknesses. Again, maybe b3 to put the bishop on a3, hopefully attack this rook, move the queen, and try to take here. Again, c4 is always a good idea, here as well, to play c5 or to take to open the c file. But either way, white has to choose his targets and attack them. There is no way that b7 is the most weak square here. Black can defend b7 in many ways, so this is why white should have chosen the targets correctly. Now he loses free tempi. a5 is another mistake. It's not too late to start attacking something and go for concrete variations. For example, here we attack this, and black basically has to play king b8, after which we can attack this and use it as a hook to open the b file. Now a4 would be quite useful. And again, white's attack is completely winning, and black is not even in the game. But after a5, continuing this bad plan of attacking the square on b7, and now white's advantage will soon run out. Bishop g7, a6, and queen c5. Of course, again, queen a5 to play b4, b5 is better. But now it's kind of unclear what was White's point. If he doesn't give checkmate on b7, then why did he put his pawn here? He just lost many, many moves. And White's lead in development has evaporated. So now we just have a game of chess. So White is of course still better due to the weaknesses that are static. But now he's not really attacking anything. And soon, as happens in chess, the momentum goes into Black's favor. White continues to move around with the queen. Here, White takes back with the rook, which is a bit strange since this is clearly our worst piece. So we should probably try to put it somewhere, right? The rook isn't really doing much. But okay, here c4. Again, finally, White does the correct move. Here the tactical justification is that the bishop is hanging, but even if that wasn't the case, White really has to start opening files to attack these weaknesses, as clearly the queen is not enough. So, rook b8. Now for some reason White gives up his pawn. Probably the more direct way to win is queen a5. For example, after queen c8, something like, I don't know, rook a3 to go here or even there at some variations. f3 might be useful in some positions, but at this point it's obvious that White's advantage is quite minimal. So bishop e3. Of course, the pawn itself isn't that important, it's more that Black is now getting some initiative. Well, not really initiative, but some chances. Now f3 just gets checkmated. The player suggests queen a3, which is of course logical. Queen b8. We can take the e7 pawn. There's really no checkmate yet. Of course, again, the advantage is not as big as it could have been, but the weaknesses are still there, so White can hope to win this game. But all that falls apart after f3, and now the beauty of opposite colored bishop positions is revealed after rook takes g2, which isn't terribly difficult. The only check in the position, basically. And Black just breaks through, where his rooks and the bishop can't really help with the g2 mate. So king h1 was played, but this is basically game over. So quite an unfortunate end, and I think White's attack didn't really work out because he didn't really know which squares to attack. He eventually decided on attacking the b7 square, which is obviously not the weakest point here, since it is quite difficult for White to attack many times. He can only use the pawn, and this takes 3 moves. Well, instead he should probably focus on c6, maybe a7, c7, mainly by developing his bishop to c5, which is also a weak square in itself. So understanding weak squares is quite important, and I would suggest reading up on this a little bit more. Good luck.